hobby, for the 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 hobby. Welcome to the For the Hobby podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hagedorn, and this is episode 1. On our first episode, I'm going to talk to two of my favorite people in the hobby. They're well-respected collectors, content creators, and all-around good guys. But first, I want to explain what For the Hobby is. For the Hobby was created out of my love of collecting cards. Over the years, I've connected with some great people in the hobby, discovered some amazing cards, and had some really fun experiences along the way. With the For the Hobby podcast, we'll share some great stories, talk a lot about cards, and most importantly, thoughtfully share our love of the hobby. So without further ado, here are my first guests. From Cardboard Chronicles, Josh Johnson, and from the House of Jordans podcast, Chris McGill. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us, Jordan.
So let's start with you, Josh. If you want to just give us a little intro, tell us where you're from, your history in the hobby, and when you got back in, and what you do, who you collect, all that.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited to kick this off. I know the three of us have been talking about this for a little while, so I'm excited. So my name is Josh. I run the Cardboard Chronicles YouTube channel, which I started about 1.5 years ago, and I am an avid basketball card collector. I collect LeBron James, Penny Hardaway, the Michael Jordan, and a few other high-end pieces. I prefer to stay in my lane of 90s basketball cards and also early 2000s, mid-2000s, exquisite stuff, some higher-end stuff as well. And, so I made the Cardboard Chronicles channel to try to get more involved in the community, to get other collectors involved and start to feature different collections throughout the hobby and try to bring some more awareness to what's out there and what people have and what interest is there for different collectors and things like that. And I also run a series of training videos to help new collectors coming into the hobby to kind of give them a leg up. So that one is how to collect cards. So I run that as well.
Sounds good. Well, I have to say I'm a fan of the channel. It's been something that's really enjoyable to watch, and you have exposed your viewers to a lot of great content, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks.
So, Chris, you want to introduce yourself, where you're from, your history in the hobby as well?
Sure. I'm Chris. I am one of the three co-hosts of the House of Jordans podcast. We've been going for about 1 year and 2 months now, and we kind of, sprung up in the wake of the Cardboard Chronicles, hobby content movement, so to speak. And, we have a smaller niche, podcast that originally started focusing on Michael Jordan cards and 90s cards, and now we've kind of expanded our scope a little bit. So that is, one thing I'm very passionate about. And, I do that with Christina and Brian, the other two co-hosts. And then I'm a Michael Jordan collector, primarily. That's kind of my passion. I absolutely love collecting Jordan, collecting 90s Jordan in particular. And also, I dabble a little bit in Luka Doncic cards. I kind of dabble in a bit of modern cards. It's pretty much it for me, my friend.
Love it. Well, as you guys know, we talked about this for a while now. For the Hobby is something we're creating to uplift the hobby and just create more banter. So we've had some incredible conversations over the last several months, and I appreciate you guys being on, and we're going to get into some pretty interesting topics here. And I want to start with the health of the hobby. So I think we all agree. I mean, we all got in a similar time, around 5 years ago, and 4 or 5 years ago. And as that happened, we realized that over those 5 years, the health of the hobby has really grown. And you've seen a lot of cards go for insane amounts of money. There's been a lot of people that get back into the hobby. And it's been super exciting. So let's start with you first, Chris. Just want to talk about kind of the state of the hobby, the health of the hobby from your perspective.
Yeah, I could talk about this for hours. But I'll make this very concise for us. And, if you hear something that I should expand on, just let me know. But I would use 3 words to kind of describe the state of the hobby right now. And I think those words are euphoria, speculation, and nostalgia. It's euphoric in the sense that, as you just referred to, the hobby has from the perspective of a financial aspect, has been absolutely, on an unprecedented bull run, going back, depending upon, which market you're looking at, maybe going back to 2014, maybe going back to 2012. It's been surreal to kind of be a part of that, to see it happen, to try and understand some of the causes of something like that. It's kind of like this untouched terrain of data that has accumulated over this period of time, and I try to bring a rigorous and analytical look at it. But when you step back and look at it as a whole, it's a very euphoric period for the hobby right now. Just everybody kind of the rising tide is lifting all boats, and it'd be pretty tough to find a player or a product to collect that hasn't done relatively well over the last few years. And then the second word I said was speculation. So the speculation aspect is largely focused, in my opinion, on prospects. And we have a very unique situation over the last 2 seasons where we've seen Giannis become, the MVP of the league, and now it looks like he's going to do it on back-to-back occasions. We're seeing LeBron James have the best 35-year-old season any NBA player has ever had. He doesn't look like he's lost a step. We have rookie classes in back-to-back years that are producing, potentially multiple generational talents. And all this has created a menu, an a la carte menu of players that, collectors and speculators and prospectors can choose from to sort of, put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and pick a player that they think is going to flourish and succeed. And so there's a very speculative aspect to collecting right now, which is tied to the performance of these great players and prospects. And then nostalgia. And nostalgia is what brought me back in originally, which is a connection to childhood and to the 90s. And it just so happens, and it was a happy accident of history, that the 90s was a period of beautiful artwork that was married together with incredible technological innovation, which produced card designs that still have not been matched to this day. So there's a lot of nostalgia, people reaching back to the 90s and even earlier and reconnecting with those collecting roots. And the final note I'd just say on the health of the hobby is that depending upon the view that you take, the hobby could be seen as almost in an infancy right now. The market is very inefficient in the sense that there's lots of profit opportunities and there's not enough competition yet to drive the profit margin down to zero, which is what we would see happen in a perfectly efficient market, which tells me that there's still a lot of informational advantage to be gained in a market like this. And as a market matures, that will go away to some extent. We also have a lot of new collectors. They're very young and they're cautious for the most part, and they sort of slowly and gradually build up with respect to the hierarchy of the cards they collect. And, depending on how you look at the hobby, I mean, in its greatest form, it has the potential to become like a hybrid of art collecting, of sports futures, of stock trading. Kind of all of those elements are sort of present but undeveloped as the hobby's still sort of in a nascent phase. And the counterpoint to that, though, is that we really depend on ethics and integrity among collectors and among participants to sort of self-regulate the hobby. So you look at all those indicia, and it kind of tells me that one way to look at the hobby, despite the tremendous growth that it's seen, is it's still very young. So that's kind of the state of the hobby as I see it right now.
I love it. It's very in-depth. It's very perceptive. And as you know, we've talked in depth about the state of the hobby and the health of the hobby, and I think that's a very good analysis. And Josh, I would love to hear your thoughts beyond that.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I definitely agree with everything that Chris was saying. I love this point. It's very analytical and accurate. I was going to take a different route with this question, talk about something a little bit different, which I thought, could speak more to my knowledge in the hobby and my community that I built up. I'm sort of in a unique position where, I communicate with probably the widest range of different collectors just because of the platform of my channel. And to describe the health of the hobby, I kind of take it from a social aspect and a community aspect. And from that perspective, it's extremely strong. you can kind of go into the hobby in your own bubble, and you can kind of collect and do your own thing and follow the market and just look at it from a financial perspective. But in order to flourish properly, you need a strong community and a strong base of passionate people to push it forward. And I think at that level, we're at a really strong point in the hobby. We have just tons of new people coming in that are coming in with that nostalgia that Chris talked about. So they're coming in with a really strong base of wanting to do this and not just profit from it, not just make money. And I feel that's very important for the future health of the hobby. And there is a lot of that. There's a lot of people that are coming in and they genuinely love the cards. There's genuine interest to the hobby itself. And you obviously have some actors that are coming in looking just to make a quick buck, flip some cards, make some profit. But in general, the people that I communicate with and that I have on the channel and have networked with in the community are here for genuine reasons. I felt this podcast that you're setting up here is kind of lean towards is to really help genuinely increase that nourishment and help grow the hobby from an organic perspective, and not just focus on the financials and not just focus on how all the money that's coming in, and look at it from the perspective of, we actually do have a really strong, passionate community, and that's just going to get better over time.
I 100% agree, and I agree with everything you guys both said. I like the analytical approach and the very intelligent approach from both ends, from the community standpoint and just from the financial side. And you're right, Josh. I mean, the reason we started this podcast and for the hobby in general is to connect with like-minded people, and all three of us share our love of cards, and it all started from that nostalgic connection to certain players and certain sets and certain cards. And so I think for us to expand on that and continue to be advocates for the positive aspects of the hobby is something that I'm looking forward to. And so with that said, I really appreciate you guys' perspective. That's obviously why we're here on the phone and talking about on episode 1. So I appreciate that. So next up, we will touch on some of your favorite things in the hobby. I think we all agree we love certain players, love certain cards, sets, just creating content around it and connecting with like-minded people, like I mentioned before. So I know what my favorite things in the hobby are. I have some of my favorite players and things, but Josh, you want to start out and tell me some of your favorite things in the hobby?
Yeah, for sure. To start out, obviously piggybacking off my last answer, my favorite thing is just the people and the community I've built. And, Chris is a great example, and Jordan, yourself. We've become really close friends through the hobby, and I consider you guys to be extremely close, to me as friends and people that I can go to for not just card stuff. So that's always been my favorite part of cards. And drilling into the actual cards themselves, I just really love the creativity and the plethora of options we have over the different years. Like if you're looking for Chinese stuff, if you're looking for 90s stuff, if you're looking for basketball, football, there's really everything out there for you. And to me, that's kind of been the fun part, is finding stuff that I didn't know existed. I come upon 90s set that I've never seen before, or even like Panini, they're coming out with new sets that I enjoy. There's like retail only sets that I've found recently that I didn't even know existed. So there's a lot of cool intricacies to discovering new things within the hobby. So getting more specific, I guess, pretty much anything LeBron James at this point, I'm interested in pursuing and trying to upgrade my collection. I do primarily focus on the high end stuff, the more expensive cards. And that's kind of just like the natural progression of myself as a collector, moving up, into the little bit more rare, more sought after pieces in the hobby. So I consider myself to, be more of a high end collector, and I still find enjoyment in some of the cheaper cards and ones that I find, as time goes on. So I still enjoy, the lower end and the mid end stuff as well.
Chris, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Josh put it very well. I would, maybe add from where I'm sitting. The thing about the hobby, it's always at your fingertips. If you have a phone or you have an internet connection somewhere through a laptop or something, you can always be participating in the hobby. And, of course, you don't even need those things. You can just bust out your shoebox and rifle through cards for hours, and it's, that in and of itself is a pleasure. But to the community aspect and the social aspect of the hobby too, you can break out your phone and just be instantly plugged into dozens to hundreds to thousands of like-minded people who are just as passionate about this thing as we are. And I think that's pretty special. And it's not something that just happens, by chance, and it's not even something you can force. It's something organic to the magnetism of collecting cards that we all sort of have naturally gravitated to it, and we're all kind of in this thing together. And so I love that part of it. I love the puzzles that are presented. Why are some cards more popular than others? Why does once in a while a card sort of break rank and become highly coveted all of a sudden? Why do certain players collect more attention in the hobby than others? And then how does that change? What are the mechanisms that change that? It's a really interesting case study. And you can bring all sorts of different analytical lenses to that question. You can look at it through the perspective of economics. You can look at it through the perspective of behavioral psychology. You can look at it through the lens of sociology. It's really just so much interesting phenomena to study. And like Josh said, there's an aesthetic satisfaction that comes just from appreciating cards, and not only your own cards. You can go on Instagram or Facebook, even eBay, and you can look at some of the most gorgeous pieces of art that blend together graphic design and athletics, and you can enjoy them for as long as you want to. And then the other part of that is the creative satisfaction that comes from building your own PC and assembling cards that you think are important for whatever reason or that you enjoy, looking at how other people have constructed their PCs and looking at their creative output, so to speak. And finally, to put a personal flavor on it, meeting two extraordinary people like yourselves has been an absolute pleasure. And I collect with Christina, my girlfriend, so it's been a bonding opportunity for us. I collect with my cousin Brian, and the three of us have a podcast together. So it's really it's all that, man. It's the hobby. There's a reason why it's called the hobby. It can become all encompassing if you want it to be, or it can just be something that's light that you just do at your leisure. So I suppose that's how I would answer that question.
I love it. I think to piggyback off both those things, I think the people you meet is the most special part to me. And I absolutely love the diversity of the hobby. You have people from all walks of life. You have collecting different players, different sets. Some people are just investors. Some people have a card shop. Some people have a podcast. Some people, like Jim Beckett, who I recently met, had a price guide for many years, and now he has a podcast. And so you meet different people and you kind of find your place in the hobby. And I think it's just an unbelievable way to bond. And we all love sports, and we all found a way to gravitate towards cards. And probably most of us had them as a kid, and now we're back in it as adults. And I think it's super fun to be able to have this outlet, a creative outlet to build your collection, to your point, but also a getaway, a little bit of escapism that when you're stressed out, you can sort your collection. It's kind of therapeutic. And there's something about that. And I think for us, even though this is for the hobby, we are uplifting the hobby. I think for us on the phone, and I know a lot of people listening, this is more than a hobby. This is kind of part of their lifestyle and something that they really enjoy. And if it's escapism, we want to do that even more, whether it's going to the National or meeting up at a show or talking on the phone or texting or searching for that steal on eBay or connecting with collectors to get the cards you want. It's just been an incredible experience to get back in. And I know for all three of us, it sparks a lot of joy. And I think that's the point of this too, is to try to get people to fall in love or fall back in love with the hobby, but more importantly, to stay in love with the hobby. And I think that's something that's really important for us to think about as a group, as an entire hobby, whether it's the card brands or the designers or the collectors or the card shop owners or the breakers. And as you guys know, I've always implored you to, and I implore everybody listening to think about the health of the hobby. Think about your favorite things of the hobby. Try not to get jaded and really focus on the positive aspects of how much love this hobby does have. Go ahead.
One point to what you said.
Sure.
Yeah. In order to bring the hobby forward and make it for the hobby, I think it's important for individuals to try to give back to the hobby, and more specifically, helping other collectors. I've seen a lot of people, helping people find cards that they know their friends are looking for, or give someone a deal on a card because, you've built up a friendship with that person, or, just giving a card away to someone that you feel is more deserving of it than you are, or it belongs in their collection, you believe more than it does in yours. So I feel that side of it is very important to give back to the hobby, and you'll see that back to you in different ways. It may not be immediate. You may not have someone drop $1,000 card in the mail to you one day, but you never know, and the relationships you build through that are very important, and I hope we can continue to do that as a hobby and move forward that way.
I completely agree. I mean, I think the biggest thing with that statement is that to stay relational. I think us three are all very relational. There's some people in the hobby that are very transactional. And I think when that happens, it does become about the money and just the one-off transaction. Whereas when you're doing things from a relational standpoint, not just in the hobby, but in life and in business, I do believe in karma in that sense. And I do think what you put in, you get out. And so I completely agree.
Yeah, that's well said. Let me add one point, if I may, as well, which is that there definitely are people who, Jordan, I think you put this very elegantly. There's people who are focused on collecting. There's people who have an investing approach. There's people who blend the two of them together. But I'm cautiously optimistic about the inherent appeal of the cardboard itself, such that no matter what it is that brings somebody into the hobby, I think the overwhelming desire to remain over the long term is going to be there when you're sitting in front of a table and you have these cards that you've acquired, and for whatever purpose you acquired them, you can't help but just thumb through them, look at them, appreciate them, connect them to different moments and experiences in your life, and different moments in sports and in athletics. And when that process starts going, that's when you really get into a deeper level of enjoyment with the hobby. And then when you tie in, like Josh said, looking out for people will do generous things and look out for you too. It's one of the most, fascinating and endearing parts of the hobby is just how generous the people in this hobby can be with their time, with their resources, with everything. So, I'm like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic about the inherent appeal of cards themselves, that no matter what the reason is that somebody came into the hobby, even if they came in as an investor, when they start looking through that stack of PSA 10s that they have sitting on their desk, they start enjoying these cards a little bit more. I think that's what keeps people coming back, is the inherent collectability of these items.
100%. So we will move on to our PCs. I think we talked about what we enjoy about the hobby themselves. So let's dive into the individual cards. I'm actually going to kick this off and start with my PC. So as you guys know, I collect Brett Favre. I have a pretty heavy 90s Favre collection. I also collect a lot of 80s and 90s rookies and stars. Love guys like Randy Moss and Eddie George and Barry Sanders. On the baseball side, Griffey, Cal Ripken Jr., Frank Thomas, Derek Jeter. And then when you go to the basketball side, MJ, Penny, Shaq, Kobe. But that's my PC. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. I'm working on a series of books, collecting a lot of 80s and 90s over the last 5 years, and would love to hear more about you guys' PC. So Chris, if you can talk about some of your PC items, your goals with your PC, maybe a few of your favorite cards.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's not nearly as interesting as yours, I'm afraid. My PC, for the first few years that I started building it up again here recently, it was exclusively Michael Jordan, and I kind of built it at first. My PC consisted of me going on eBay and buying base cards that were graded PSA 9 for $10, and having 5 mail days a week, and just walking out to the mailbox every afternoon to pick up those cards was very addicting, and it was thrilling. Then when I amassed a significant number of those, I kind of wanted to step up a little bit and sort of cautiously proceed into the mid-range of Jordan cards. And then I got started down the rabbit hole of inserts, and before I knew it, I had acquired quite a bit of those. And then after that, I sort of wanted to apply that logic even further, and through the guidance of people like Josh, and also just kind of what had always appealed to me but seemed out of reach, was to start going for some of the grails. And the method of doing that would mean that I would have to give up a lot of the PC that I'd built in order to consolidate into those grail type of cards, and that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 2 years. And so, now I've kind of focused on 90s, those impossible 90s cards that, I never thought I'd be able to own, but through a lot of time and patience and good fortune, I was able to acquire some of them. So, the type of cards I'm talking about are like PMGs, rubies, platinum medallions, stuff like that. Those are the type of cards that I'm really focused on and that I'm slowly but surely adding to the PC. And then I do collect one other player, and that's Luka. Started collecting him towards the end of his rookie season after I'd seen enough to sort of make me a believer in his game, and also that I'd seen enough to know that I would really enjoy tracking this guy's career as it develops. And so I've added quite a bit together with Christina, who all credit due to her for starting the Luka PC for us, because she spotted there was something special about him from the get-go, so we kind of stumbled inadvertently into the Luka PC from her just ripping 2018-19 product, and kind of Luka was the guy to chase, so we started chasing him, and then we started paying attention to his career, and it all kind of turned into a PC from there. So we've added a lot of really nice Luka stuff to the PC as well. So that's I'm kind of like, my PC is like 2018 and later Panini, and 1998 and earlier 90s stuff, basically.
Okay, I like it. I do have one question about that. So you have MJ, you have Luka, you have some whales. Those cards, you have grails or whales or whatever you want to call it. But you mentioned that there's some other cards that you've maybe found in dollar boxes or along the way that just maybe speak to you a little bit. Can you tell me about some of those other cards that you found outside of the main two PC people?
Man, those are some of the funnest cards to collect. Not exactly dollar box cards, but there's one set that I'm extremely excited about right now that I've been working on putting together over the past few months. It's the 1999-2000 Upper Deck Century Legends Michael Jordan subset, which is a 10 base card subset from the Century Legends set. And the subset has base cards and it has parallels numbered to 100. The cards are exactly the same except for a little bit of hollow foil and a die cut. And the ones numbered out of 100 are surprisingly very cheap for what you might think that a Jordan in that range would go for. And I don't really care too much about grade when it comes to my PC, honestly, so I've just been trying to track them down in any condition I can. And I've got 9 of them. 9 I have tracked down. I have one more to go. And there's lots of little sets like that out there for all types of different players, not just Jordan, that are sort of, lingering out there that you can go find. And, in terms of dollar box stuff, I mean, it's really as simple as some of the base sets from the late and mid-90s, and I'm talking Metal Universe, I'm talking Skybox EXL, stuff like that. You can pull base cards from dollar boxes from those sets, including the Jordans, that are just absolutely phenomenal cards. The design, the artistry is just sensational. So, there's really a level of entry for anybody to get involved at any price point. Or you could do it kind of like I did and get involved at every price point when it feels right to you.
For sure. Well, now that we've put Josh to sleep by talking about base cards, why don't we go to you and your PC, Josh?
No, I definitely love listening to you guys talk about your collections. I feel like I have an emotional stake in both of your collections. Just how much I've ridden the waves with you guys through the last year or so. So I actually do enjoy your guys' collections. But that's kind of the fun part about collecting cards is you can build your own PC exactly the way you want it, and there's really no two collections that are the same. So no one has control over your collection as much as you do. So for me, I like the way Chris kind of went through like the history of it. That kind of helps organize it a little bit for me as well. So I'll start with when I first got back in, I was focused primarily on Penny Hardaway cards. So kind of in the same vein as Chris, late 90s, 96 through 99. And I was actually primarily focused on ones where he was featured with the pinstripe Magic jerseys, because the nostalgia of those jerseys for me is pretty next level. So I focused primarily on, when I first started, it was the inserts, the dead end cards for Penny, picking up some of the Metal Universe based stuff for a while, building out some binders. I have a pretty nice Penny Hardaway binder. It's like, I think it's 360 cards full of just kind of random stuff, cheaper cards, some $100 cards, some random stuff, And then as I got more involved, met some different people, started to get a little bit more money that I wanted to allocate towards it. I started picking up some of the higher end pieces. I started getting some PMGs. PMG Red I acquired pretty early on. Some of the rubies, credentials, some of that higher end stuff, and that sort of got me really focused on more of the high end stuff and trying to find more rare stuff, especially with 90s, because some of those rare cards are a lot harder to find than the modern stuff. And then, along the way, I kind of started to dabble in LeBron. His stuff was quite a bit more expensive, so I didn't dive in too deep at the time. I was mostly focused on Topps Chrome refractors. I started picking up not non-rookie year Topps Chrome refractors. I felt that, Topps Chrome did a really nice job with their photography, and their refractors had really nice shine to them, and I like shiny stuff. So I picked up a lot of LeBron stuff early on before his refractors really took off in price. So I was lucky enough to own some really cool stuff then. And kind of the same things started to progress with LeBron, started to get a little bit more high-end pieces. Started grabbing a lot of gold refractors. I liked focusing on kind of the best iteration of the refractor set from each of the years. So I started trying to get some of the gold stuff and not so much on the other colors. There's just, too many in a lot of those sets. So I try to focus on just silver and gold. And then in the last couple of months, kind of to what Chris was talking about, and he keeps giving me credit for the consolidation, but, I didn't do too much help with him on that one. Chris's PC kind of stands on its own. It doesn't need me. It doesn't need my help. So, but the same thing for my collection. I started to consolidate some of my stuff that I picked up over the years and started to try to pick up some of the really big pieces. So I do own what I would consider to be some of his best rookie cards ever made. I own a 2003 Topps Chrome Gold Refractor, numbered 1 out of 50. It's a pretty big card. Picked that up about a year ago, and then I have a bunch of other, high-grade gold refractors from other Topps Chrome years, and I have a 2009 Exquisite, numbered out of 18 LeBron card, and then I have the big one, which I've been working on for a while, is the 2003 Exquisite RPA out of 99. Picked that one up on a public auction pretty recently, and that was a really expensive card, by far the most I've ever spent on a card, so I had to sell quite a bit to get to that. I've also randomly picked up a couple high-end Michael Jordan cards, just to drive some of the Jordan collectors a little bit crazy. But that's actually mostly for myself. I do like the high-end 90s Jordan stuff. I have a 97 PMG Championship Michael Jordan. I at one point owned a 97 Rubies Michael Jordan card, and those are pretty big pieces. That pretty much sums it up. Other than that, some of the newer stuff, kind of like Chris, I kind of find random sets that I enjoy. There's a lot of Panini sets that I've collected over the years. I was collecting Revolution Galactic. They kind of reminded me of 90s. I have a couple other sets that I'm working on that I haven't shared yet, but there's other Panini sets that I find, kind of in the weeds that I enjoy collecting. And I kind of do those for myself a lot of times. I don't share a lot of that stuff that I collect. Some of the random cheaper stuff, shiny stuff that I feel is unique and different. I'll pick up some of that kind of Panini stuff. But still, primarily at this point, if it's LeBron or Hardaway, it's usually something fairly high end, or something that scratches an itch that I haven't had up to this point. So that pretty much sums up my collection.
Yeah, that LeBron RPA is a monster.
Yeah, it's not small. It's not cheap. No.
And then you picked up the green PMG Penny, which was a grail of yours, right around the same time, correct?
Yes, I don't know how I forgot about that one. I didn't round back. I did end up. Yep, I picked up the Penny Hardaway green PMG because I kind of had lost focus on some of the Penny stuff because I picked up a lot of what I wanted, but I never had gotten that green PMG, and that one actually came up for sale the day after I bought the LeBron RPA, so that was a pretty wild 24 hours. So I did get the green PMG, and that kind of solidified my place, in the Penny Hardaway community. So that was exciting to pick that card up. Yeah.
You mentioned collecting modern. That's something I think is super interesting I want to touch on. I know all three of us are kind of 90s purists. We love the inserts and some of the grails from the 90s, but we've all found some things to collect that are modern. You know, Panini and some of the newer cards. Specifically for me, it's as a Packer fan, it's Aaron Rodgers. Being from Wisconsin, it's Giannis. I picked up a lot of Giannis rookie cards. I've collected my player. I'm in my third season as an NFL agent. Just got back from the Super Bowl. Some of you guys know I represent the kicker for the Chiefs, Harrison Butker. I've been collecting him. I have a couple of his 101s, which are a lot of fun to have when you represent a player. And then also collect some Mahomes and Tom Brady. And so I've gotten into some modern stuff as well, even though I'm mostly 80s and 90s. But can you guys touch on that, Chris, maybe a little bit about the modern stuff? I know MJ is that grail, but now Luka and some of the other new stuff. Can you tell us a little bit of your opinion on that stuff?
Yeah. First of all, Panini has been going for about 10, 11 years now with the NBA license. And I really am most familiar with their most recent, entries to the basketball card canon. But you can go back and look at and sort of trace the evolution and the history and the integrity of their work. And it started off at a very high level with brands like National Treasures. A few years down the line, they brought in Prism. And I think last year, in a sort of fortuitous stroke of good luck, they kind of hit their stride in terms of offering an incredibly diverse array of products that can kind of suit a wide range of collecting interests and tastes. And they did it at the same time that one of the most interesting rookie classes emerged, from Luka to Trae Young to DeAndre Ayton, and to all the the tremendous talent that sort of is still Devontae Graham. I mean, there's still guys, and there will be going in the future rookies from that 18-19 year and those 18-19 products who were phenomenal. And so you look at the 18-19 products, and some of the ones that kind of catch my eye, I really like Threads. And I made it a mission to try and put together some of the Luka 1-of-1s from Threads. And there's 9 total Luka 1-of-1s in that product, and I've got 3 of them now.
Wow.
So I'm pretty excited about that. And the fun thing about 1-of-1s and about Threads, it's a low-end product, but the designs are nice. And the 1-of-1 is kind of like a nice happy medium for somebody like me who, will I ever own the Luka Prism Black 1-of-1? Of course not. The Nebula 1-of-1? No, definitely not. But, can I make a play at some of these Threads 1-of-1s and, strike this compromise between a low-end product but a very rare and desirable card from that product? I mean, I think I can. I think there's a nice happy medium there for a collector like me. So I really like Threads. Some of the other stuff I like, I do like the classics and the staples. So, we're talking Prism. I really enjoy Prism. And Prism is a really interesting structure to that product, because you've got the Prism base card, then you've got the silver parallel, and then you've got this wide range of all sorts of different types of numbered and unnumbered parallels, all the way up to the gold parallel, the Nebula parallel, and the Black 101 parallel. And Christina and I were lucky to get the gold Luka out of 10 way back when it was still relatively modestly priced. And so that's kind of like a crown jewel of the Luka PC, and that's one of my favorite ones to just kind of break out and look at. And, they got the National Treasures brand, they've got Flawless, they've got Immaculate. There's lots of different really interesting products, and they all kind of take a cue from their predecessors. So National Treasures sort of took the torch from Exquisite. Threads and products like that are taking the torch from some of the 90s products in terms of, being strictly cardboard oriented. And Prism, of course, depending upon who you ask, is the heir apparent to Chrome, although some people would say Optic is the heir apparent to Chrome. So I think that's kind of a nice little survey of what Panini's up to these days.
I love it. If people listening don't know anything about cards, they now just got schooled on the modern day card. So Josh, I know you have some newer stuff, but I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about your green penny PMG, your LeBron RPA, but more importantly, you are one of the most competitive people in the hobby. Can you tell me about that?
You feel like you're setting me up for a trap, but I'll take the bait. Yes, I am competitive, and I don't even think you and I have discussed that, so I'm kind of interested to hear you to see you pick up on that. But yes, I am definitely competitive outside of cards, even through sports growing up and things like that. But through cards, it's given me another avenue to remain competitive and kind of flex my competitive juices. I think guys like MJ and Kobe and LeBron, outside of basketball, they look for ways to stay competitive either through business or whatever outside ventures they have. So I kind of treat cards in that same realm. So yes, I'm definitely competitive, and I try to do my best to keep up with some of the other guys. Because the interesting thing about cards and the competitiveness of it is that the amount of money that you have is really the ultimate factor in order to win. And so you can honestly be just crushed and trumped, by other people that have way more money than I do. So that happens often. But I feel I do a pretty good job to remain competitive in different creative ways that I improve my PC or move up the ranks, as it were, without just having a lot of money to just throw at it. So I like to think that I do a pretty good job to remain competitive with some of these other guys.
Yeah, you do. And Chris, as do you. I mean, I think you two I've had the most intelligent conversations with about the hobby. Josh, we roomed together at the National and we were talking about the state of the hobby and some of the new players in the hobby and are always analyzing what's going on within the hobby. And Chris, you and I have spoken about a lot of what's going on and how to maneuver. And I will say that you two, you don't have unlimited budget, but the way you maneuver within the hobby is extremely intelligent and extremely tactical, but also with a lot of love and a lot of empathy and gratitude for what you do have and just a love of the cards. So Chris, I would love to have you touch on that a little bit as to your approach and just kind of how you operate.
Yeah, well, you do have to get crafty when you're trying to, go up against some very, also intelligent collectors and, like Josh said, guys with bankrolls that can just crush you. And so, one of the ways that you can kind of do that, I think, is by, trying to stay ahead of the curve a little bit. And one of the ways to stay ahead of the curve is just, trying to anticipate what cards might be, of interest to you that you maybe think they're not really in your league right now. But the funny thing about this is we all kind of think the same way. And we're all kind of, if I look at a card and I say, man, that card's way out of my league, there's no way I can get it. There's a lot of other people who are kind of thinking that way too. And if you can kind of be the first mover to get into a card before somebody else does, or before the collecting community sort of gets into it, you can get in and get a card at a relatively cheaper entry point than people down the line. And that's been extremely true in Michael Jordan cards. So my crown jewel Jordan is the PMG Red, and I bought that card in the fall of 2018, and people, when they found out about how I bought it and what I paid for it, they ridiculed me. They laughed at me. They thought I was crazy. They thought that that I'm ruining comps everywhere and that I'm just not doing the hobby the right way. But if I hadn't have got it then, I wouldn't be able to afford it now because of the way that the market has appreciated, and especially like cards like that have appreciated. Unfortunately, that gig is up, and the 90s Grails in particular for Jordans, most of those are just unfortunately out of my range at this point, so I'm going to have to find a new way to sort of get into these cards that I've sort of always wanted and are kind of like bucket list type of cards. And then the other thing is just be of value to people. Like my PC can't hold a candle to some of the great collectors in this hobby, whether it's because they've got like a 15-year head start on me, or it's because they're just craftier and smarter at collecting than I am, or they just have a great bankroll. I can't hold a candle to these guys, but what I can do is I can offer analysis. I can sort of give some of my theories and my insights, and that's kind of what I try to do on my Instagram page. And as a result of that, I've met a lot of great people who've given me advice, who've steered me, who've helped me, who've pointed out things to me that I would have never been able to see on my own. I think that's kind of the other side of the tactical coin, is that you have to be willing to learn from people in this hobby who know more than you, who are more experienced, more savvy than you, and who have really interesting perspectives that are different from yours. And so if you have that humility to be willing to learn, and if you're willing to take a risk every now and then and sort of trust your instinct and your taste, I think that's a pretty good recipe, to build a decent PC even in this crazy market.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. So with that said, I want to touch on something that we didn't really talk about. It's a little more somber. So we're going to go to a little more of a somber note. We'll always stay positive tone on this podcast, but something we should talk about because it was pretty tragic was the death of Kobe Bryant. So we all loved Kobe, his competitiveness, the love he brought to the world. I cried that day. I was very sad for his wife and his daughters. I couldn't even believe it. I was sad that he was gone, but I was really, really, really sad and devastated for his wife. I want to talk to you guys about his impact, not just on the hobby, but maybe on the world, and get your perspective. So Josh, I would love to start with you if you're down.
Yeah, this one's obviously difficult to talk about, but it's important. And like you said, he's a pillar to the hobby, so he deserves as much. For me, that day was extremely difficult as well, and it was almost, I didn't want to accept it for a while. It was just so shocking and something that, you just almost felt like it was a nightmare that you wanted to wake up from. And so that whole week was tough. And then when the Lakers had their first home game and they did their kind of tribute to him and LeBron spoke, I finally kind of sat down and watched that thing in its entirety and let myself take it in and start to accept what happened. And it was extremely powerful, and I thought they did a really nice job. And it kind of rounded out how I felt about him, over his career. Honestly, over his career, I despise the guy. I grew up in Arizona, so I was a big Suns fan, and he, ripped the hearts out of me and my team several times. So as a competitor, I didn't like Kobe as a competitor, but as his career went on and I got older, I started to appreciate his career more. And I still remember watching his final game against Utah, where he single-handedly beat the Jazz, with no energy left. You could tell this was his last game, and he was just giving it everything. He had 60 points at his age and all the injuries he's gone through, and no energy left. That was probably the most exciting game I've watched, and I remember watching that game late at night at my house. So he means a lot to me and the community and basketball as a whole. So it's a really tough loss, obviously. And for Cards, I think I've always said that he was, third overall, just in terms of hobby love and, hobby importance and, some of the valuable stuff. He's probably third in the highest value for basketball cards, at least. Just below Jordan and LeBron. Those three guys kind of stand above the rest just in terms of their hobby popularity, and not necessarily just by their accomplishments or skill. There's other guys like Bill Russell and Wilt that can stake claim to some of that, but those three, I think, stand above just because of, how well-rounded they are in terms of popularity, swagger, some of their, off-the-court business successes, their marketing, their branding, their shoes. They kind of did a little bit of everything, and they're very well-rounded people and well-rounded athletes. And I think Kobe is definitely up in the Mount Rushmore of basketball for me for all time, just because of what he's done for the game and who he's inspired going forward. There's tons of players in the NBA today that were really struck by it just because of how much Kobe's done for the NBA community, for some of the younger guys, and how much advice he's given them and tried to help move the game forward. He's touched a lot of guys. I think I saw Russell Westbrook talk about him, and was getting choked up, and Trae Young, he wore his jersey that day because just of how involved Kobe's been with the NBA and some of these younger guys, and I think we're going to miss that part of it greatly.
Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. You mentioned Bill Russell. Today he turned 86 years old, and it kind of hit me again that Kobe, he's lived two lives of what Kobe did, and it was just devastating to think about, that he lived 45 years longer than Kobe Bryant. And I just can't believe it. I mean, I really thought he would grow old like that and be the guy sitting courtside at All-Star and be the one who mentored all these players and really grew the game globally, continually. But his impact is felt. I mean, what a great ambassador for the game of basketball, but also just an inspiration. I mean, Kobe will make you feel lazy just by what he did in probably a day. let alone his entire life and his entire career. And super devastating. Chris, I would love to hear your thoughts overall.
Yeah, those points are very well made. I wish Kobe could have seen how much he meant to people, the way the world kind of stopped when that happened, and everybody kind of tried to figure out a way to make sense of it and to, keep pushing on after something as devastating and unexpected and tragic as that happens. You think about it was like JFK or Princess Di. I mean, it was just absolutely, it transcended culture, it transcended sports, it affected everybody on some level. And it kind of speaks to how important and iconic athletes have become across the world, and the power of sports and the ability of sports to bring people together and to give us a common language and something to relate over. Card collecting has become a truly global phenomenon. I mean, it always was to some extent, but the internet has brought us all really together and interconnected us in a new way here recently. And this tragedy and then collectors wanting to just kind of show how much they appreciate and cherish Kobe ended up totally captivating the card market, and everything else, every other card, every other player became completely secondary for weeks, and it still kind of feels that way. I mean, Kobe, I know diehard MJ collectors who just, have been doing nothing but talking to me about Kobe cards and looking at Kobe cards. That's just how important and impactful he was as an athlete and as a transcendent figure. And, living in LA out here, I work in downtown LA. I see the billboards, the artwork, the graffiti. I have friends sending me pictures from Manila in the Philippines of these tremendous works of art that they're creating in dedication to him from everywhere around the world. And the thing is that it's, makes the tragic situation even more, sort of sad, is that he was really starting to gain this new appreciation in the hearts and minds of people, and that includes collectors. And it's a very not unimportant in the grand scheme, but when we look at collecting, we see that Kobe was gaining a whole newfound appreciation in the market for sports cards even before the tragedy happened. I mean, people were anticipating his Hall of Fame induction. People were sort of seeing him as this very lovable presence, supporting all types, every type of player, introducing his daughter to guys after games, really advocating for his daughter's basketball career, for just the importance of athletics, period. It's hard to really appropriately communicate just how sad it was, and it still is. But the least we can do is sort of celebrate his legacy, cherish what he meant to the sport, and that's about all I got on that one.
Yeah, and I would say to cherish what he meant to the world. He's bigger than a basketball player. He had more than an athlete. Was this campaign with Serena and LeBron and all these guys, but I think Kobe was the epitome of that. He was somebody who was just a leader beyond the game of basketball. You heard guys talking about how he was the happiest they've ever seen him now in post-career, creating a business, spending time with Gigi, coaching, mentoring some of these younger players. I mean, Giannis deleted his social media the day Kobe died. I'm sure he was just couldn't believe what was happening. And the impact he had on Trae Young and Luka and LeBron and all these guys, I mean, everybody looked up to him, and he was a leader of men and a leader of our nation, really, and even the world for a lot of people through the Olympics and some of his other global endeavors. But I mean, I had the pleasure to see Kobe play 3 times, once in the playoffs in 2004 when they had Karl Malone and Gary Payton, once in 2010 in November he played against Melo in Denver, and then I actually had the pleasure to sit 9 rows up at his last game at Madison Square Garden. And it was unbelievable to watch him and how he handled himself. And then, of course, in his last season to drop 60. My favorite part about that last game was not that he dropped 60 and they came back and won in front of a home crowd. It was that he grabbed his teammates unlike I've ever seen him grab his teammates. And he pulled them close as if he was leading them into the future. And it was just a crazy moment to watch. It was a new Kobe. It was a humble Kobe. It was a selfless Kobe. It was somebody who we all agree Kobe was selfish at one point in his career, and that was the only way he won some titles at times. And that mentality, that Mamba mentality, that ability to lead people and lead his family, and I mean, it's just the impact is unbelievable. So I agree with you guys, honoring his legacy. I have hundreds and hundreds of Kobe rookie cards that I will not be selling. I'll be giving them away to friends who love Kobe. I'll be keeping them. I'll be sharing those with people who I know will cherish them. And it's bigger than the hobby. It's bigger than basketball, but we certainly can use the hobby and the game of basketball and some of our memories and our words to honor him. So I want to bring that up. I know you guys have a soft spot for Kobe as far as what he meant to the world, and I appreciate you guys sharing your kind of, really tough thoughts on that. So I will end with this. You guys are both incredible content creators. Josh with Cardboard Chronicles, Chris with the House of Jordans podcast. Josh, I'll start with you. Can you talk to me about what you've enjoyed the most with Cardboard Chronicles and what you've learned?
Yeah, sure. What I've learned the most is just how much uniqueness is out there and just how much difference there is between different collectors and what they enjoy and what they choose to collect. It's really infinite, and that's kind of what I've propped myself up against is how infinite everything is, and I can kind of create infinite content based on that those differences that are out there. So I've really enjoyed that part of it. What I've learned, I've learned a lot, from different people that I've interviewed, different people that I've met through Cardboard Chronicles. I've learned cards that I didn't know existed. I've learned, how to spot market trends, even from guys like Chris, like how to analyze the market better, how to spot future trends, how to focus on certain sets of cards that are relatively more important than other sets, how to spot cards that maybe are underappreciated and move into those kinds of areas. So I think that kind of rounds out like what Cardboard Chronicles has done for me is really just exposed me to the different people that are out there and all the different ways that you can approach collecting.
Well said. Chris, what have you learned from House of Jordans and what have you enjoyed the most?
Yeah, well, in some ways I'm a bit of an extrovert, and that means that I kind of need to talk things out in order to reason my way through them. I don't just sit there and figure out what I'm going to say. I just kind of say it, and then I figure out what it is that I'm trying to say as it happens. And, a podcast is a great format for that. And that's probably the reason why our podcasts are painstakingly long sometimes, but we are trying some things to, address that issue slightly. But interestingly, a lot of people seem to like the long form content as long as they have timestamps, so they can pick and choose which topics they want to listen to. And that's something that's pretty interesting, is that people have very specific and narrow interests of things that they like to listen to and topics that they like to discuss and think about. And along that line, I mean, doing a podcast, it sharpens my mind and it makes me focus more, and it makes me more attentive to detail and more attentive to saying and thinking correctly and properly. Because there's a big incentive to not look like a complete fool, although that still happens on occasion. But it definitely, there's a strong incentive there to do good research, to think about things carefully and closely, so that when I do say something, or when I do think my way through something, or all of us on the podcast address a topic, that we do it in an accountable way. Because if we mess it up, there's a lot of people who are listening to it and who are going to notice it. So that's another kind of advantage of making content, is that it makes you sharper and more in tune. And I think the most important thing that I like about House of Jordans, besides the fact that I get to do it with two people who are extremely close to me, is it gives me a place in the hobby. We touched on this earlier, but my collection can't hold a candle to some of the great collections out there, and it never will. But I can contribute something of value here through insights and things that I kind of pick up and share with people, and then people share with me their opinions on them. I learn. We create a discussion and a dialogue and a network of people, and eventually a community sort of around this topic that we all kind of have in common with each other. So it's an absolute privilege to have a piece of content that we create for the hobby, it's an absolute blessing that people care enough to listen to it and to interact with it and talk about it with me and with us. And I just, as a final note on that, this just kind of occurs to me, but I encourage people to make content if they have something to offer and they're going to take it seriously and do it properly. I think people should make content. We need more content. I consume probably as much hobby content as anybody. I watch every Cardboard Chronicles video. I listen to every podcast. I really love consuming this stuff and hearing what other people think, especially if it's maybe not what I think, and maybe I can learn from that. So, that's kind of where I fall on that, and that's why I love what you're doing, man, with For the Hobby here, and why it's such a privilege to be on episode 1 for Josh and myself. Is man, this is going to be some great content, I think, for the hobby, and there's absolutely a need for it.
Well, I appreciate you guys. As you know, we've become good friends and beyond cards. I will say, Josh, with Cardboard Chronicles, I've really enjoyed watching the episodes. I had the privilege to be on episode 15 and talked about that, and we've connected with a lot of people, and some people have hit me up and said, hey, I saw your episode, it was great. And Josh, I give you a lot of credit for stepping up and creating content. I know facilitated a lot of great content, a lot of great relationships, and had some really great, insightful people there. And I think you've inspired me and a lot of people to start creating more content and to give us the courage to kind of get off our butts to do some work and share our love of the hobby. And I think, Chris, with you with House of Jordans, I've enjoyed it. The long form stuff is super interesting. I think you have a great dynamic with Brian and Christina, and you guys get into all kinds of topics and rants, and a lot of times those rants are actually the most charming part of the episode. And so credit to you guys both. I really appreciate you being on the first episode. Josh, something you said earlier was about how unique people's collections are, and I wanted to touch on that. I think collections, you're right, there are no collections that are the same. And you might collect the same player or similar era, similar set, but every collection is like a fingerprint. It's just so different. Yet we all have a fingerprint, right? And so we're all in the hobby. We're all doing this for the love of the hobby. And it's been really cool to come together. And that is the goal of For the Hobby, of the podcast and any other kind of content we create or any meetups we do or anything we do with these books and things. We'll focus on bringing people together, which I've touched on several times. But I want to thank you guys for being on the first episode. Josh, Chris, do you have any final thoughts, final words?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm extremely humbled by all the words that you guys have said about Cardboard Chronicles, and I'm glad that I've inspired what you guys are doing now, and I'm extremely excited about For the Hobby, and I love the basis of it and what you're trying to accomplish, and obviously here to support anything that you need from me or Chris, and I know I speak for him on that, and we're really excited and hope that it brings the hobby to the next level.
Chris?
Josh said it all. I will just echo what he said.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you, gentlemen. We will be in touch very soon. And until next time, collect what you love and love what you collect.
Perfect. For the hobby, 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 for the hobby.